What's up, guys? So I am Dave Maconi. You might have seen me on one of the other Part 2 podcasts on Steve's channel maybe a month or so ago. We are doing another collab today with Part 1 on my channel, Brains and Gains, Part 2 here on Steve's channel. So Part 1 on my channel, we're going to go into a Q&A format, kind of like a traditional podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about Steve with his current health and his fasting and what's going on there. A lot of information in that podcast, so definitely check it out. And then here on his channel, Part 2, we're going to do a deep dive into my recent blood work, very comprehensive blood work, and we're going to break down exactly what everything means. I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of you guys who are interested in health and how this could be implicated in future endeavors in bodybuilding, or for those of you who decide to use performance enhancing drugs. It's all going to be relevant, so I think you guys will really enjoy this. Appreciate you checking out my channel, and I hope you guys enjoy this talk with Steve. So I thought this would be a cool idea for the podcast that hopefully doesn't come across as me trying to get a free consult. That's funny when you said that. I was like,
discussed it previously, no problem.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't even think that. But so I have pretty extensive blood work that was done recently. And then I have a little bit of another cholesterol test that I did after 60 hours fasted, just out of curiosity.
Right.
So that's really, my cholesterol is the only thing that kind of stands out to me, specifically my LDL. So I thought we could do. It went up from fasting, which is actually not atypical. So anyway, just for the audience here, we're just going to review some of this. I'll do a screen share. We'll kind of flip through it. I guess this will record the screen share, right?
It should be. I think so. I saw it on other Zoom conferences that it recorded as well.
So let's do this. All right. So is it showing you for you? Cool.
This was fasted?
No. So this one was just done on the 5th of February. At the end, there's just another cholesterol test, another lipid panel that's fasted.
Okay. So this one is not fasted.
This is not fasted.
How many meals did you have previously? And how much?
So this was done at 7 a.m. Last time I ate was it was fasted. Like, I hadn't done an extended fast, but this was after probably about 12 hours.
Okay, so you ate the day before, right?
Yeah.
And did you go in hydrated?
Yes.
How much water did you drink?
I drink a lot of water, but that morning, maybe about 2 cups of water.
So that's what, half a liter?
I think about, yeah.
Okay. Do you have a urinalysis on this result?
Not on here. I've done a urinalysis before. That was totally normal.
So now we can't rule out dehydration. Most of your results are fine. So
I was going to say, yeah. For us, it's not. But yeah, if I had maybe like high hematocrit or some other issues there,
creatinine,
yeah. So.
But
anyway, so for people, so this first one that we're looking at here is called a CMP. All right. It's a metabolic panel. So, glucose here, obviously, if this was elevated, that for people who are using insulin and growth hormone, really eating like a ton of like very high carb diets, or they're just gaining body fat. Once you start getting into that 100 plus range, they call you pre-diabetic. I think it's 130 plus is when they start calling you diabetic. And you have to look at like HbA1c, which is a marker of, it's basically how is your glucose longer term.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to add anything
glycolated hemoglobin, if I pronounce glycolated correctly. So glucose interacts or chemically bonds to hemoglobin, and of course hemoglobin is found in the red blood cells. So by checking your hemoglobin A1c, which is a variant of regular hemoglobin, by checking out the percentage, you can actually get an accurate idea of your serum glucose concentrations over the last 90 days. But it also depends a little bit on how high your red blood cell turnover is. And that influences it a little bit. So you see with guys that just came off, they just did a blood donation, that their hemoglobin A1c concentrations also changed because they got more new red blood cells because they just did a donation to get the old red blood cells out.
Right. Yep. And so just kind of moving on here. And again, for me, these are pretty much always normal. I just do it because it doesn't really cost me much money. So I just like to have it included. But the creatinine, urea nitrogen, these are things, and obviously your GFR values, these are things that a lot of bodybuilders are going to have to look into. If any of them are elevated, you might be a little concerned. Or if GFR is, below 60, I don't know if you also like to use like the standard reference ranges, or do you like to look at it something different?
I check my cystatin C because I have an abnormal amount of muscle mass, which results in an
Mm,
abnormal amount of creatinine or
yeah.
creatinine. So the latest reading was like 1.25 milligrams per deciliter, which is top of this reference range. But I've had it up as high as like 1.95 milligrams per deciliter, which would alarm everybody,
Yeah.
even the bodybuilders. And then you realize the day before you did incredibly strenuous workouts with drop sets and rest pauses, and you didn't understand that creatinine can also elevate from strenuous workouts the day before. So it's a metabolic waste product in protein metabolism and ATP synthesis. So the more muscle you have, the more energy you produce, the more creatinine you're going to have. And that's why it's important to check your cystatin C, which is not dependent on your metabolic rate and your muscle mass. And that's a true indication of kidney function. And if that's slightly elevated, an inulin clearance test, which they inject inulin intravenously, and then they check your urine for 24 hours. And if everything is cleared, you have good kidney function, and they can actually give you an accurate glomerular filtration rate based on that, because the E in EGFR stands for estimated. So it's
Right.
just a calculation, and there's 5 different calculations on how to get this number.
Right. And also for people who don't know, obviously this here is non-African American versus African
Mm.
American. It is interesting that like their values are so different that they had to basically change
Yeah,
the
I
values
think
there,
it's
how they
it's
do it.
apparently the African Americans and Africans in general have a different kidney function, but also more muscle mass compared to the
Right.
Caucasians. But here
Yep.
in Asia, they don't have a specific reference range for Asians.
Which is
Just
interesting because they're
the
even, I would
same.
wonder if it would be different proportionally because when you tend to look at, racial differences, it typically is that those of Asian descent have even less muscle mass.
Hmm.
It's even similar with like bone density, like African Americans have generally the highest bone density and then Caucasian and then Asian. So I would wonder if there would be different kidney values for that
I've,
as
I've seen
well.
creatinine of like 0.5, 0.6 here of guys that are physically active.
Wow.
It's below the reference range. You're like, whoa, what's going on? Oh, you're just,
Yeah.
you're 120 pounds. You're 120
Right.
120 pounds bodybuilder. They compete in
Yeah.
like the 60-kilo weight class, and they have good
Interesting.
kidney function. So there's a huge discrepancy in creatinine levels, and I would always check your cystatin C. And if you're worried, a 24-hour urine collection test with cystatin C and inulin clearance is the best way to assess your kidney health. And then the ultrasound would be next. That's probably a lot more expensive.
Well, that's where I think somebody like you comes into play, right? Because like once you start getting out of normal levels of muscle mass, activity,
Hmm.
general size, a lot of these tests are based on general population, right?
Yeah.
And so most people and most of the blood work that my clients send me is totally normal. Every once in a
Hmm.
while you get a little bit of an outlier here and there.
Right. Yeah.
But, for some of the clients that you have, there's probably going to be a lot of things where it's like, hey, yes, this is off, but we need to do this in this test, which is more specific. And that's
Hmm.
going to allow us to see
Yeah.
if there's a real problem or not,
There's a step-by-step approach because you can't go in for the full health checkup every time.
Right.
So if you see a reason that something is off, you do additional testing that's usually more expensive or needs to get sent out to a different lab, because all the basic tests are usually found in LabCorp, Quest. They have all the basics, and then maybe some of the extra testing you need to do to assess a certain medical condition or an issue that is performed somewhere else, because I don't have the testing equipment. So for me, my blood work was almost never off when I was drug free. So it's like,
Right.
I did my blood work every year. Oh, all good. Cholesterol good. I was eating like 10 whole eggs per day and beef and pork and yeah, a
Wow.
ton of cholesterol. My testosterone's, a little bit over the middle of the reference range. Cholesterol never off. I was physically active. Liver enzymes never really off. An odd reading here or there, maybe a couple points out of bounds to the point you don't have to worry.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
And then you
Yeah.
go,
And some of these things, like we'll get down here to liver. And so I don't, I mean, almost nobody, I mean, electrolytes, you're almost always going to be in range. Even like all the blood work I've looked at, I don't know if you've seen anything like that really
I've
stands
seen it
out,
a
but
couple times where the potassium is a little bit high. Certain PEDs cause that high potassium. Some of the like telmisartan or some of
I
the
was
other
going to say,
blood pressure
yeah,
medications cause that. I've seen
right.
carbon dioxide very high for the guys that do endurance work, which you would suspect otherwise. So sodium bicarbonate.
Yeah, some of the ARBs, I could see that.
Yeah,
some potassium a bit.
So you really have to, like blood work for drug-free athletes. It's so easy because there's no medications in there that could really mess it up. So if it's really messed up, then there's a medical condition, not because of a certain drug that you're taking.
Right. And then liver enzymes. I know I was kind of harping on this earlier, but so these are. So when I show it, does it show me highlighting this on your end too?
Yeah, I can see everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously these are all in range, totally normal. I mean, and if you are natural or enhanced, I mean, I don't think an occasional slightly elevated number, like if my ALT was like 50, it's not like I'd be like, holy crap, I need to run to, I mean, if I didn't have a medical background, I would say still see your physician about it just to ask. But if it's a one-off, all they'll tell you is, yeah, well, let's retest in a month is all they're probably going to say. Make sure you're drinking water, retest. Okay. But I'm sure you see plenty of elevated liver enzymes.
Oh yeah. I've seen it up to like 300, 600,000, and that's just from steroids and poor cycling hygiene. But, like for drug-free, I think the highest came for me about the top of the reference range or slightly over it. And it was always related to training. But of course, when I started taking performance-enhancing drugs, especially oral steroids that are very harsh, then they went up to like 185. And the Superdrol cycle was 185 units per liter. But at that time, I was already having this undiagnosed non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So part of those liver enzymes came from the NAFLD, and part of them came from the Superdrol. Because without any oral steroids, I was hovering around the 100s, 125. If I would take a week off, they would come back to 50, 60. And it's almost half a reduction, right? And you think, it's fine, but it's liver enzymes. There's so much things that can contribute, the supplements and the diet, and maybe you're allergic to certain foods, and you take the carnitine, and carnitine and choline converts into TMAO, and that contributes to your liver enzymes, right? So there's always like some chemistry going on in your stomach that you're unaware of, and that can cause elevated liver enzymes. So it's like I've rarely seen the total protein, the albumin, the globulin, a couple of times the bilirubin out of range. Alkaline phosphate is usually low because a lot of guys are zinc deficient, or high.
Yeah, even guys I've seen on gear, I usually don't see people have elevated alkaline phosphatase too much.
High alkaline phosphatase and low white blood cell. That's usually an indication of zinc deficiency. So your white blood cells are a little bit on the low side.
Yeah.
But I see it a lot, so it's not alarming.
So once we get, if it was really low, obviously, or really high, you can indicate an issue. So all of this here falls under a CBC. So when most of what people are looking at are hemoglobin and hematocrit, platelet count to some degree. I don't focus much on these here as far as like the breakdown of different blood cell types.
No, for you don't have to worry about it because you're not piercing your skin every day. But for the bodybuilders, for the enhanced bodybuilders, the eosinophils can be off, the neutrophils can be off, and it's a very good indication to see which ones are off, what's actually going on if you have an infection.
So are you specifically looking at that for the case of infections?
Yeah, every time. For all the enhanced guys, I always look at the white blood cells.
Yeah. I would agree. I think one value that I don't ever hear anybody talk about, and I'm not, so when you have different values that you test, a lot of times doctors won't test certain values because it's kind of like, well, if we get an abnormal reading, like what are we going to do about it? So like for one example, I remember when I would get like STD tests. And a standard doctor, they won't even include like HSV 1 and 2, which is herpes. And I'm like, why would you not include this? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, of course I would want to know that. But the reason they don't is because, well, one, like a huge proportion, like the majority of the population does have HSV 1, and that's generally cold sores and things like that. And just because you don't get cold sores doesn't mean you don't have it. I mean, most people have it. But the reason they don't test it is because, one, most people will turn up positive. There's a psychological toll to people thinking that they have, this is a positive test. What does this mean? But three, what are you going to do about it? You don't do anything about it. Right. You don't do anything unless you have an outbreak. And then you get like a antiviral.
Or, one of those. Because I have cold sores as well. And they flare up when when I'm overly stressed or my immune system is down.
Right. And so that's why they don't test it, because it's like, what are we going to do about it? You know, there's one more test I'll show you when we scroll down a little bit. That
Yeah.
is another example of that. But so RDW here,
Yeah.
it's kind of like if it's messed up, what are you going to do about it? But actually, an elevated RDW is correlated with increased cardiovascular mortality. One study I saw actually showed a higher correlation than CRP, which is fairly well correlated. So I'm just throwing that in there, just, you know, as an interesting tidbit. Not again, if it's elevated.
Make sure you stay on top of your iron, vitamin B9, and B12, because, you know, when you see the mean corpulus volume of the, you know, the content of the red blood cell, and then the red cell distribution, which is the difference between sizes of the red blood cells. And if you have micronutrient deficiencies, that's all skewed. So you see that with drug freeze, it's very rare. But with enhanced bodybuilders, it's quite common, because their red blood cell production goes up, but their micronutrient intake doesn't go up. And now they create a micronutrient deficiency. And all the red blood cells which are created after the nutrient deficiency, they have, you know, skewed readings. And then it's impossible for them to donate blood.
Right.
Because they don't want it. They don't want this blood. You know what? Yeah, everything's off. We can't use this, you know? Get out of here.
I think, again, what I have highlighted here is just big focus, because, again, obviously mine are on the lower end. And I've actually had anemic, you know, like very minor anemia levels. But you do see bodybuilders who, you know, hematocrit 50 plus, hemoglobin 50 or 17 plus. There's a guy, I guess I won't name his name, but I know he had consistent issues with hemoglobin being upwards of like 20. And I remember listening to this podcast, and he was like, well, I'm really happy now it's at 17. But he was acting like this was like totally normal. And again, I understand I'm probably more cautious than the average person, but I was like, you know, dude, if I'm like even like above like middle, I just start to be like, like there's something going on. And again, I don't thankfully have to worry about it, because mine's always been pretty low. But it's just another example of bodybuilders being like, all right, as long as it's not horrible, they feel like they're fine.
If I'm not dying, if I don't have to come off cycle, then it's okay.
Right.
So it's weird. And, you know, with red blood cells, when you go where you are in hands and your hematocrit goes up and then you come off, then your hematocrit comes down, right? Because you no longer get this, you know, EPO stimulation from the anabolic steroids. Then your hemoglobin goes up because the red blood cells are being destroyed, and now hemoglobin content of the blood goes up, and then it gets metabolized into bilirubin in the liver. So it's like a step-by-step process, and people don't understand. Bilirubin is how it happened. Well, 4 months ago, you had a high RBC.
Right.
So it's but with naturals, it's very rare unless they train with an altitude mask, or they live at elevation. Like I've trained a couple of guys at elevation in Mongolia and, you know, Nepal and Bhutan. That's, you know, 10,000 feet.
Elevated.
Yeah, 10,000, 12,000 feet, and then you get their hematocrit back. They're drug free, and it's like 52.
Wow.
But their range goes up to 58. It's crazy. 56, 58.
That's interesting. So have you seen blood work where the ranges are changed by the labs based on their elevation?
Yeah. These ranges that you have right here are not the same as the ranges I have. That's why I mentioned like when I had that private Facebook group, I mentioned that these are the generally accepted ranges for the Western world, but they might not be the same in your country. Like the reference range for creatinine in Vietnam, 0.9, the max.
Wow. Interesting.
Right? And then my bodybuilder clients they're like over 100 kilos and like, dude, my creatinine is 1.25. I'm 25% out of range. I said, no, this is normal for a Caucasian, but your reference range is, so you always have to keep in mind that you might not, you know, your muscle mass or whatever you're doing might not apply to the reference range at all.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So here we get to lipid panel. And I think you're going to see, okay, so the reason that you're going to see some things repeated here is the standard lipid panel.
Yeah.
Then here below this is LabCorp and Quest are different. So these aren't the values I'm used to seeing, because I used to use Quest, but there's like an advanced lipo profile, they call it, it's an NMR test. And that gets into particle size. Now, again, this isn't as comprehensive as the one that Quest does, in my opinion. Quest has a little bit more of a breakdown, but that's why, like, you'll see cholesterol 242 and then cholesterol 223. They're testing it by different methods, even though this was from the exact same blood draw. So, Yeah, which is interesting, right? So
Mhm.
even though their ranges here are pretty
Same.
much the
Yeah, pretty
same,
much the same.
so and most of the values are close, but I mean, they're not. I mean, 223 versus
Did
242.
they say which testing methods they do? Because for certain markers, they got multiple methods of analysis to determine the numbers. Like for hormones, for example, they have several different methods to test it.
Yeah, I'm sure you could look it up. I
Yeah.
don't know offhand, other than that there's like the more advanced NMR lipo profile is
Hmm.
the second one, but as far as like the details and how they test it, I don't know. Um, and again, it's generally similar. We see a very high HDL,
Right.
which I've tended to have pretty high HDL. 94. I mean, I've
That's
seen very few men who
that's
have had a
epic.
90. Yeah, the 90 plus is pretty rare.
Yeah, I
Um,
had like 80 or 70 something after Novodex and Clomid, but of course that's
uh,
artificial. So now
yeah,
my
yeah.
HDL is at 70 and my LDL was 125, I think. Yeah.
Under 25.
125, 100,
Oh,
100.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That
I
would
was
be
gonna say,
crazy.
oh, geez.
Only on SERMs will you see LDL below HDL. So after SERMs treatment, after Novodex and Clomid to recover HPTA, I think my HDL is like close middle top 70s and LDL is like 60s. Yeah, it was lower.
I and my mom have
Hmm.
had LDLs below HDL in the past.
Yeah, so it's rare, but not unheard of.
Yeah.
You know.
But obviously, looking at this, that's not the norm for me. And like you said, it's not the norm, but I have had it. And so it's interesting, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you have an opinion here. I had a doctor on, a cardiologist, Dr. Nadir Ali, and he is one of those in like this relatively small space of people who really don't believe that LDL is problematic, which is really goes against what the majority of
Yeah.
cardiologists
Hmm.
state. And he believes that as long as he's like, when you go on a ketogenic diet, you will have increased LDL,
Hmm.
decreased triglycerides, and
Hmm.
increased HDL. And he's like, that's exactly what we want. And he sent me like 10 papers showing lower mortality, lower overall mortality on
Hmm.
those who have high LDLs. He got into the fact that higher LDL correlates with lower risk of infection.
Right.
And I understood his points. I'm not a cardiologist, so I'm not going to say I have a
Hmm.
definitive answer. I tend to side with the general medical knowledge body of knowledge that
Yeah, because
I
there's probably 100 studies to disprove it, right? But
right,
it's
right,
even all these studies are so circumstantial, and your circumstance and my circumstance are not the same. And then you have to find like a couple studies which are almost identical to your current situation, which is also almost impossible.
yeah,
So again, you would go with based on your research, you would make the best decision possible, right? But if we both do different research,
right,
then we probably have different decision making process. Like I don't feel it's bad that LDL is a little bit elevated because we're both physically active. We're doing everything we can to reduce inflammation, and of course, inflammation also contributes to cardiovascular disease. The LDL foam cell potential is only part of the story. Blood acidity
right.
is part of the story. The calcium score, calcium levels in the blood over long periods of time. Did you check your C-reactive protein or no?
I did, and we'll get to that
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
So, and that's actually a confounding variable
Hmm.
because I do have, like I said, I mentioned before, some GI issues that lead to more inflammation.
Hmm.
Now, so that also makes me wonder about the LDL. I know Leo is a big fan of like LDL pretty much as low as possible.
Hmm.
I'm sure he would probably suggest a statin at this point. And we
Yeah.
do see, and again, my triglycerides are very low.
Hmm.
At this time, I was taking 4 fish oil pills a day, which
Hmm.
was, I'm switching over. I had a fish oil that was higher in DHA,
Hmm.
and I'm switching over to a more EPA
Okay.
concentrated one.
Hmm.
But overall, I think at the time that was probably maybe about 3 to 4 grams of omega 3s per day. And like I said, I'm going to be switching that
Is
to the
that
higher
is
EPA
that omega
concentration.
threes or actual EPA and DHA?
It's total omega 3s with about 80 to 90% of that being EPA and DHA.
That's the pharmaceutical grade fish oil, right? Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, well, it
Yeah, yeah,
shows. Hmm.
it's fine. And I know actually even Leo, I think mentioned this. There's that reduced trial which showed that higher doses of EPA, lower cardiovascular risk. Although there are cardiologists who will point out that, that's one trial, right? And there are other trials that dispute that.
Right.
And I know one guy who's a pretty well-known lipidologist, and he would say that at this point we have very strong evidence to suggest that some fatty fish, like salmon a few times a week, is absolutely correlated with lower cardiovascular risk. But that in his opinion, he doesn't believe that he has enough evidence to, say 100% that higher doses of EPA are going to be helpful. Now, I think it is going to probably be helpful. There's no real downside to taking it. So I think the 4 grams or so of EPA is probably a safe bet.
I take it for a very long time already, fish oil. So it's, and so far no cardiovascular disease. Of course it's, that's
38, right? So
you have to look over, decades. It's like this moment in time, like 2021, right? It's a good time to be alive because we got to experience freedom. Before the world probably locks down forever. But the data for what we're trying to do is not really concrete yet.
Yeah.
And so
we have a lot of answers, but
everybody's guesstimating at this point.
Right.
Really. Right. Nobody can say hands down, this is the correct way to approach it. And then, all the research that's done, it's like it's been performed on research on fish oil, right? What about all the other contributing factors? It's
obviously you try to control for as many confounding variables as you can, but there's limitations.
Is there any cardiovascular disease in your family?
Yeah, my grandfather. So my grandfather had a heart attack, and my grandmother had a stroke, but they were both over the age where it would be considered a risk factor.
Okay. So
like when you're tallying up somebody's. Say again?
Later stages of life.
Yeah, when you look at if it's like men having a heart attack below 55 as a direct family member would be a risk factor, and he was like 66. So technically,
any lifestyle things that could have contributed to the cardiovascular and the stroke.
I'm trying to think if he smoked or not. He wasn't very active. Neither of them were active. But other than that, I never met him. So he died pretty much right when I was born. So, but to my understanding, no. But he wasn't. I know my dad said that he wasn't taking his medications and things like that. So who really knows? My dad is 62 now, so he's getting close to the age his dad died, and he's got great cardiovascular health as far as we can tell. But so with this test, I just want to emphasize. I think. Is it terrible? I don't think so, but I'm actually not totally sure what I want to do about that LDL. I've usually been in like that 100 to 110 range. I've had some that were lower. This is starting to get a little high for me where I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure you never saw it because it was before you and I met, but I did Carnivore just to see for
250 to 300 on your LDL. Same here, man.
Yeah, 400 and some total. And like 330 LDL. And you know what pisses me off? You get these cardiologists who will say, not cardiologists, doctors, they'll say, and I've seen it in papers, that dietary changes can only make about a 10% difference in LDL. I'm like, are you nuts? That is so inaccurate. I was able to, it's just ridiculous.
My total cholesterol was 400. HDL was 90 and LDL was 270 on Carnivore. 1 month in Carnivore. 1 month.
Same.
But my dietary cholesterol intake was obscene because I was eating beef, butter, and broth, and because I was 5,000 calories. It's like I got to keep my calories up, whole sticks of cheese, and it's so. How would have my lipids? Yeah, I'm sure somebody in the comment section is going to say carnivore is great, but you shouldn't eat all this cholesterol. Yeah. Well, I never gave 2,500 calories a try, but I was trying to bulk up.
I was not even eating that many calories, dude. I was dieting. And first of all, it helped I felt great gut wise. Now, feeling great does not necessarily mean that there's correlations. Healthy? Well, it doesn't mean that you're healthy, but even on a gut specific level, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is improving, even though you feel good. You see this all the time with people with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, where dietary changes will make symptomatic changes, and then they will get tested, and something like calprotectin, which is it's measured in the stool and it's a marker of gut inflammation, will be super elevated. And so I'm just saying, you can't always say, well, I feel good, so it's healthy.
No, right. I mean, I felt good too, but I still have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Right. So I don't like when people say, well, like, if you're feeling good, it's like, no, there's plenty of diseases that you feel fine until it's way too late. So
if you were to ask Boston Lloyd how he feels right now, he says he feels good too.
Yeah. John Meadows too. John's got a ejection fraction of 35%, and he feels he's shocked because he feels great, which John's like such a good guy. I feel bad.
Right. No, I feel bad for the guy too, and he's one of the more health conscious guys. So when he announced the news, I was like, it's one of those moments where I wanted to quit bodybuilding.
Yeah, nobody's safe.
Yeah, it's
now he does, and not to dismiss it, but he does have a clotting issue.
And he had something in his family as well, right? I think one of his family members also had a heart attack when they were way younger.
I'm not sure about that, but I know that his colon was removed because he got a clot. And so, again, not to dismiss it, but I'm just saying, like, that is a factor. But regarding the carnivore, go ahead.
No, go ahead, carnivore. Yeah.
So I was only eating like 2,000 calories a day, and it was still that high. Now I had some higher days that were like maybe 3,000. And this wasn't, I was eating a lot of beef, a lot of turkey. That was the majority of it, but I was still having my fish oil. I was still having like sardines and oil and stuff like that.
Same here.
So I'm going to do another experiment in about 2 weeks, and it's not sustainable, but I've been having the gut issue. So I just want to see how it works. I'm going to do like what I'm going to call lean carnivore, which is going to be purely lean meats plus olive oil. Which technically olive oil,
bison and turkey.
Like chicken breasts, 99% ground turkey, egg whites, sardines, and salmon, and just a ton of olive oil, because I'm really curious how that would, because my cholesterol will still be high from like the chicken, right? The cholesterol intake will still be high, but a lot of studies show saturated fat intake is more what causes the higher cholesterol. So I'm very curious just to see how the lipid panel is from that. Like I said, olive oil technically is not 100% carnivore, but for my purposes,
I did. Okay. So I did carnivore plus chia seeds because I needed a little bit of fiber, because it was literally like a hippopotamus every time I went to the bathroom. Yeah, disgusting, dude. Really? With or without the butter and the cheese, just eating pure meat like a hippopotamus. And after a couple of days, it's like, man, I can't be doing a full cleanup after every session, So I added in the fiber, so I had a little bit of intestinal or mass to the stool and got more omega-3s in, and that was okay. Personally, I'm not a really big fan of oils because it digests so fast and it goes in and out of the bloodstream really fast. What I will say is that my liver enzymes permanently increased after that 28-day carnivore experiment. 25 points. My liver enzymes permanently increased.
Really?
25 points. So I think some of the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease came from there. And I know that's blasphemy to say, but I have the charts to prove it. I have my blood work before, hovering around 50 to 75, sometimes 100, and then 75, 125.
Interesting. Yeah, I just
purely fat intake, saturated fat intake, and it all goes through the liver. So I'm
okay.
Yeah.
I did not test my liver enzymes because, so this was like I said, the blood work we're looking at now is obviously very comprehensive. The one I did after carnivore was through Let's Get Checked. If anybody knows Let's Get Checked. So I have like an affiliate link. So if anybody wants 30% off, go to Let's Get Checked and use discount code BRAINS.
Down below.
And it's actually it's funny. My friend literally just texted me this morning that he used it for his testosterone. Although he tested it at 3 p.m. So I was like, dude, like you got to test it. For people who don't know, you need to test testosterone at like when you wake up, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. They won't even take you at like a LabCorp request after like 10.
If you're natural, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. If you're natural.
If you're enhanced, you take it the day, 24 hours after your last injection.
Yeah. It's obviously a little different.
Yeah.
Which, speaking of which, we're getting into the fun stuff here. So we've got testosterone free, IGF-1. So all this is pretty normal in range. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to comment on, but just touch on the hormones.
A little low. Well, it's middle of the range, but how's your sex drive?
Annoyingly high libido.
Okay, then you're
So
good. Okay, then you're
not
good.
an issue.
You're not just saying that for the video, right?
Just whoop.
Yeah, right. So if I were to see like my estradiol at 17 or 20 picograms per milliliter on cycle, but of course my testosterone would be way
I was going
higher,
to say, yeah,
then
there's
the
a
libido
ratio
is not
factor.
good. So it's like a ratio between the testosterone and
Right.
the estradiol, but you're both in the middle of the range, so you
Yeah.
should be good. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
these are
I would say
solid
my
readings.
estrogen is pretty proportional to the total test,
Yeah.
which, some people would say, oh, wow, like, your levels should be, and you get this with these like TRT clinics, right? These guys, well, I know a guy who measures, so he does like once per week injection.
Yeah.
He tells clients that there's no reason to ever do below 200 milligrams, which is like, I'm not saying 200 milligrams of testosterone a week is a problem necessarily, but to say that nobody should be on less than that to me is absurd. And he
Yeah.
has them measure a week after their
The
injection,
lowest
so they're at
point.
the lowest point, and he wants them still at like 1200. So I'm like, dude, so really you're having these guys in the range of like 1200, 800, 1800, which again, I'm not saying that's going to kill you, but that is not testosterone replacement therapy.
It's
That is
most of the hormone
being
replacement clinics are glorified steroid dealers.
right.
Let's be honest. We got a couple here in Bangkok as well. They prescribe
Dude.
Trenbolone. Trenbolone. Yeah, it's not
What?
FDA. Yeah, it's not FDA
How?
approved. What they I don't know, man. This is the Western world, or this is Asia, third world
Yeah.
countries. You can do whatever. Everything
Wow.
flies under the radar. But then again, there's even in the States there are a couple labs that they give like MK677, which is not FDA approved, and TB500, not FDA, and a whole list of
Yeah.
supplements. And they write it on the prescription. You need MK677 for growth hormone deficiency. How? It's not FDA approved.
That's crazy. Wow. I mean, obviously, doctors can write things off label, but man, you're playing with fire.
Yeah, especially in America where lawsuits are occurring for less. So
Yeah.
well, it goes well until it doesn't go well anymore, right?
Yeah, right. But yeah, so I the testosterone, like I said, I feel fine. Like I said, I've never had a libido issue. I've never had, I mean, my libido is way more correlated with my caloric intake
Yeah.
than testosterone. Like within a month of dieting, it's actually a relief. Like I feel like more like normal. And seriously,
Are you single now? You got a girlfriend or several? What? You're
I
like
stay
dating around, or what's going on?
No. I mean, for me though, but regardless, I mean, obviously, you probably experienced. You're married, right?
Yeah, I'm married. Yeah.
I mean, I think though, if remember like college days and stuff, when you are dating around, that inherently, I feel like also increases your libido, right?
Yeah.
Like my theory, like people, I feel like just being when you're with somebody for like 20 years or whatever, like that inherently, it's like people think like, oh, it's just because I'm getting older. It's like, no, man, when somebody is like 50 and gets divorced, all of a sudden libido shoots up as they get back into the dating pool.
Because that's especially so if when I was still young and single, and you're financially secure and you're doing well, you got a good social reputation, right? Then you're a freaking animal, And then you gotta hold that thought. That's all I have to say.
Right.
Not that you're sleeping around, but you got to hold that thought for one person.
Oh, no.
And then you're good.
Sure. Right. That's the key. Maintain that level of intensity and put it all into one person.
Yeah. Put it in one relationship.
Right.
A lot of people are not able to do that, so that's where the issues come from.
Well, I was talking with somebody about this and I didn't want to offend them, but I was like, I would be shocked if the average bodybuilder / person on hormones there was not more lack of faithfulness, I'll say, compared to the average person, because it's like you have more like, I hate to use the word alpha. I like hate that whole thing, but like, you have a more alpha mentality. You're more driven. You're going to have a higher libido than average. So I'm not even saying like
more selfish.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'd just be shocked if that was not the case. And that's not to say that you can't be on TRT or even be blasting and not be a great dad and husband at all. I'm sure there's some correlation,
There's a very high rate of infidelity amongst social media bodybuilders.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the culture. It's what
It's
you're
narcissism, and it's everything revolves around one person, and then
right. Yeah.
me. But it's if you got a little bit sense to you, that doesn't have to be the case. But it's not the norm to stay faithful. It's definitely not the norm anymore, unfortunately. That's why you
Right.
don't see people in a long term relationship anymore. And then the social media blowout comes.
Well, yeah, right, right. Well, it's almost nobody. I found this very interesting. I was talking to again, like my friend Abel Javai, where
Hmm.
I was like, dude, in my in real life, almost everybody my age is either married or in a
Hmm.
serious relationship,
Oh
and
wow. Okay.
almost everybody wants kids eventually.
Right. Yeah.
In the
Uh-huh.
fitness scene, even in like the natural fitness scene, I would say maybe half are married and
Hmm.
like a fifth have kids.
Yeah.
Like, and again, I don't know if it's the selfishness thing or that they just, or again, not that it's
Or
like they're all
the
immoral, they're
suppressed
driven.
suppressed HPTA.
Could be, but it's just really like in my personal life,
Uh-huh.
it is very out of the norm. Like everybody, or even if they don't, they want it. My friend is a fit neurosurgeon
Hmm.
who he's probably very desirable to a lot of women. And he's like, dude, I'm just trying. Like, I mean, he hasn't graduated everything yet, so he's extremely busy. But he's like, dude, I just want somebody more meaningful, and I want to like get a farm and just like live on
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
And but like, and it's just a total contrast to what you see in social media where like I feel like it's like almost unhealthy to like even sign on to Instagram sometimes because I'm like, dude, I'm
Hmm.
just like inundated with this bullshit superficial
Yeah, and
stuff. And
everybody's
it's like,
pretending to have a perfect life, but when in reality, it's never the case.
yeah.
That's why I haven't posted on Instagram recently. I'm bored with it.
Well, I always laugh when I see I'm sure you get like some direct
You want to go back to the full
DMs.
screen while or you want to finish off the blood work and then continue the conversation? Otherwise, people are going to bitch like, "Hey, I watched half the
Oh,
podcast
yeah.
and they were so
Okay.
small."
Yeah, I
Then
didn't even
we'll,
think about that.
then we'll pick up the relationship talk. It's always a fun
Right,
topic.
right. No, you're right. I forgot that
No,
the screen shares.
no,
Okay, yeah. So all right, let's finish up here. So I
yeah.
think there's not too much left.
Mm.
Um, so vitamin D. So my vitamin D. I mean, if you can't tell, I'm quite pale, and so my vitamin D levels beforehand were like 17,
Mm-hmm. Are you
and
supplementing?
yeah. So I take 5,000 IU's
Mm-hmm.
of vitamin D a day, and I've since then tested it many times,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always in like mid 40s.
Okay.
Um, I did have a doctor when I was first not diagnosed, but when they saw that I had low vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
There's another way you could do it. So I take D3, but
Mm-hmm.
some doctors, which I don't agree with this method, but they will prescribe you. They prescribe me 50,000 IU's
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
of D2. Now vitamin
Oh,
D is fat
D2.
soluble of D2, right?
Oh, okay.
And it did increase my levels,
Mm-hmm.
but again, I mean, you're looking at proportions of D2 to D3. I think it
Mm-hmm.
just take the D3, take it once a day. You could even really just take it a couple times a
I
week
think the
because again, it's
D2
fat
is only in
soluble.
cases of severe deficiency. So maybe they prescribed it.
Yeah, I
That's
don't.
why.
I mean, yeah, it was. I think most people are going to be fine, and it's so cheap. Literally, like I mean, it's like
Yeah.
$10 for like
For a year.
100 pills or something. Yeah, I mean, it's so
Year
cheap.
supply is cheap. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think that like the like this test, the vitamin D test, is more expensive than a year supply of vitamin D
Yeah,
supplementation.
right, right. So yeah, if you're not sure, just take it. I mean, and
Yeah.
there are some concerns if you get to like really high levels, but I mean, you'd have to be taking a lot to be
Yeah.
in like 80 plus range.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
um, let's see.
PSA, all
So
good. D dimers, yeah.
are you familiar with D-dimer?
It's tested in COVID. I've seen it elevated many times now over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So I had COVID in the past, and then it stays elevated for a very long time.
So yeah, D-dimer is it's basically if you think you have like a pulmonary embolism, it's a way
Hmm.
to rule that out.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's not very
So
specific. So
platelets destruction. What was it?
I'd have to look back on like the
So
specific like
metabolism of
D-dimer is a
some
protein of breakdown
right
of
breakdown of the platelets or injury
yeah.
or something like that. So when you have chronic lung injuries from the COVID, this will stay elevated for a very long time, for
Right.
months.
And it's not even specific to lungs.
No.
So again, the reason I tested is because mine will be elevated even from my gut inflammation.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And so one of my doctors was like, you got to stop testing this, because again, this was the example I was saying before of like, why are you testing it? Because what are you going to do about it? And it's not more specific. I really shouldn't test it. Again, I test it because it doesn't cost me anything, but like, I really shouldn't test it because it's not specific to, like, I know now why it's elevated because of that issue. Right. And when I'm on corticosteroids which is unfortunately,
but you want to see a trend that it's going down, that all the adjustments that you're making are having a positive effect. I do the same. I do full blood checks every month now, every 2 months, and I don't need to check half the markers. But you pay for it, right? Yeah. I don't mind.
Or can
$200.
Oh, okay. No, that's not bad. Over here, dude, this whole panel in the US, based on their insurance fees, this would cost me about $3,500 if I didn't have insurance. It's nuts.
Damn.
Yeah, everything is just so inflated.
Proactive health is unaffordable, no? Yeah,
no. If you don't have insurance, you're just screwed.
No. I have insurance, but they don't cover all my obscene amounts of blood work that I do. But I get the posted online, and then people sign up for coaching. So it's just advertisement, basically.
Yeah.
Pays for itself.
So PSA, like I said, good. Thyroid levels, pretty normal. Yeah, this was. I mean, I'm not bulking or cutting right now. I'm just kind of maintaining, so it's fine.
Yeah, this will fluctuate all the time,
Yeah, people get into some specifics, like you need to, and I just think like you're just playing with fire again. Well, they'll say, well, you should take, this much Synthroid and this much Cytomel. And it's like, dude, unless you actually have like a thyroid condition, you have Hashimoto's, something like that. I have a new client whose doctor prescribed her 400 micrograms of T3.
What?
And I was like, I had to double check with her like 10 times. I was like, not you mean T3 Cytomel, not T4 Synthroid. And she said it was Cytomel. And I was like, dude, that is the most egregious thing I've ever heard prescribed by a doctor. I mean, literally.
Was she morbidly obese, or what was going on?
No, she has, I don't want to give too much details, but she's got a thyroid issue. But it was like, I mean, just absurd. She said her heart rate was like 110 resting. Sure. I mean, like that is like lawsuit territory easily. Right. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, because you can get all sorts of metabolic conditions from that, even rhabdomyolysis or, terrible blood acidity from all the metabolic waste products. Like for me, I only recommend T3 if it's absolutely warranted. And then it's like 25 micrograms at the end of a prep, at the end of a diet. But my guys are usually, you do a proper off-season first to get their metabolic rate as high as possible. And then they can end up their diet at 2,500 calories and they get lean. It's a year process. But at least you don't have to take thyroid at the end and then end up stringy. Why am I not filling out? It's the thyroid medication that you're on,
Yeah. So just for people who don't know, because these are a little bit more obscure. So we touched on D-dimer. ESR, that's another inflammatory marker, again, for gut issues, a little bit more specific, but it's related to blood cells. AM cortisol. So this was actually and this is a huge confounding variable, I realize. I was taking corticosteroids during this test. Oh, okay. So
which one? Prednisone?
Budesonide.
Oh.
You probably haven't heard of it.
Yeah. It's the one that they prescribed for budesonide?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm confused with another one.
So it's a more gut specific corticosteroid. And that's why I tested AM cortisol. I was very interested to see, because the idea is that it doesn't go very systemic, right? Because obviously there's a host of issues with systemic corticosteroids, especially long term, very detrimental. And so if it went really, now it might be going, a small amount might be going systemic, but if it was going very systemic, then my AM cortisol would be suppressed, which I have had before when taking stronger oral corticosteroids.
Right.
Like if you're taking like prednisone, 40 milligrams per day, you're going to have suppressed cortisol for sure. So I was happy to see this, because it meant that, okay, if I need to take it, I can, and it's not super
it's going systemic, right? And you don't have an adverse effect in other parts of the body, right?
Right. So TNF alpha, again, another marker of inflammation. Yes. Yep. BNP marker for, again, I test this just my heart to make sure it's not elevated. So if you had like worsening heart failure or something like that, BNP would be elevated. Iron, and again, this goes back to probably like the gut issues. I've tended to have almost always have low ferritin. But I've always been hesitant, and I don't know if you have a different opinion, but I've always been hesitant to supplement with iron because it's like I'd rather have maybe a little bit of fatigue and lower levels than take iron, which higher iron levels and iron supplementation has been correlated with cardiovascular issues.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, well, I'd rather have this issue than that issue, you know?
Right. And of course, if you like, for me, I have the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, right? And that shows you usually an increased ferritin levels as well. So I never supplemented with iron because I would just, raise my ferritin levels very fast and my serum iron levels very fast because, the iron clearance and reabsorption goes partially through the liver. And when your liver is impaired, you see that the ferritin levels go up. So in your case, your liver is probably very healthy because you don't, you get no bad readings of your ferritin, but your hematocrit is totally normally in range, and there's nothing off with your red cell distribution width. So as long as it's sustainable, then you're good. Now, if your iron and ferritin was like this when you decide to go on cycle, you would need to add some beef to your diet to keep the ferritin and iron somewhat around this range. Otherwise, too much will be recruited to red blood cell production. And then over time, you would deplete levels.
So you're saying if I were to go on gear, I would have even lower levels of ferritin.
Yeah, because the EPO goes up and the erythropoietic action and the red blood cell production goes up. So after a while, even though iron is being recycled, if you're not increasing some sort of dietary iron intake, by increasing more red blood cell production, iron levels will slowly deplete. And I've seen it on so many guys that have poor iron intake or poor iron absorption because they don't get so much vitamin C, that within a year or 2 years of hormone replacement, their hematocrit, mean corpulus volume, red cell distribution with hemoglobin concentration, all skewed simply because of the iron. And even though they're taking a vitamin B100 complex supplement and they're getting all their B vitamins in from vegetables and stuff. So it's just purely the iron intake that's not correct. And their ferritin is like 0, or 6.
Interesting. Wow. The only time I've had higher iron levels is 1, when I did supplement it, and 2, when I did the carnivore experiment, it was actually above range.
Yeah, it was sky high. Mine too.
Yeah.
And how long did you do that initial carnivore diet?
1 month, 4 weeks.
Same here.
Yeah, that's funny.
So high.
When did you do it?
February 2019. So that's 2 years ago.
Okay. I did it in like April 2020.
Yeah. Now, did your sex hormone binding globulin also go up during that time, or you didn't test it? I saw a lot of blood work on nitrile people who did, or drug-free people who did carnivore, and their sex hormone binding globulin ended up like 70, 80 nanomoles per liter, which is sky high. So there's absolutely zero.
Was their testosterone also increased, or?
No. So that was the same. Estradiol was all the same, but their sex hormone binding globulin went sky high. So it's all bound up. So their sex drive was not so good.
Really? That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens with the next test. I have a suspicion that it will still be elevated, even though it's going to be all leaner meats. I still have a suspicion the cholesterol is going to be elevated.
If you stay away from beef with the hema iron, that's the most bioavailable form. So if you do the turkey and maybe restrict it to 100 grams of beef, you should be okay.
I mean the cholesterol values.
Oh, the cholesterol, yeah. That might still increase. Beef, whatever meat source has a lot of cholesterol, obviously.
Yeah. So this is the last bit here, and this was only a week later, but this was after 60 hours of fasting. Now, this was not through the same lab. This was let's get checked. So you do have to consider that. So, I mean, realistically, it's about the same, right? HDL. Yeah. I mean, it's almost identical. If I just scroll up real quick, I think the LDL was like between those two. So one was 137 and one was 142.
10% increase on the cholesterol, and the HDL was where?
Yeah. So actually, I guess it was very, very slightly lower. But anyway, the point is, I mean, it's about the same. You get variation in tests. But some people would probably be surprised by that, or they'll diet and their LDL will go up.
Yeah.
But you have to consider like the role of LDL, right? And what it's actually doing in the body. And so, I mean, I've talked to like RDs who don't even know this, but like there are studies showing that when people diet, their LDL. Now, again, that you're talking like a short period of time. I mean, once you
Hmm.
then, if you've lost 50 pounds and then you stabilize, in most cases, your LDL should be improved. I'm
Right.
just saying during the acute phase of dieting, your
Hmm.
LDL can actually
Yeah, it can go
increase.
up. Yeah. And of course, blood volume has to do with it as well. So if
Mhm.
you're doing fasting, you're losing a little bit of blood volume because your electrolytes are depleting, then the concentration of some of the compounds are higher. Now, I would consider maybe 2 or 3% deviation. But this is, a little bit more significant. But I've seen it on my blood work. I've seen it go up after a fast. I've seen it go down.
Maybe, okay.
Yeah. So, and it's weird because you know that fasting creates a little bit of autophagy. So you see
Hmm.
red blood cells go down, and in most cases, when the red blood cells goes down, that's being recycled, and it's the same with the LDL and the HDL. It usually all goes down because the old LDL and HDL cells are being recycled. But it's also not unheard of that it goes up, and I'm not exactly sure why it goes up, to be honest, on while
Yeah,
fasting. With the diet, it could be because you're getting in a better state of health and you're improving cholesterol transport and triglyceride transport. I mean, your LDL and HDL transporters.
right,
LDL takes cholesterol and triglycerides from the liver, and HDL delivers it back to tissue, if to the liver, if you want to simplify it.
right.
And then it depends on how you stimulate cholesterol synthesis, whether you stimulate it in liver, or your dietary cholesterol goes up, or you stimulate it in skeletal muscle with steroids, and then more delivery needs to take place. And then
Right.
sometimes when cholesterol is saturated in certain cells, the LDL concentration increases also because it can't. There's like LDL receptors on cells which allow it to enter and deliver their content. And if other cells of the body are saturated with cholesterol and triglycerides, then the LDL concentration raises in the bloodstream. So now it doesn't the delivery is it's the same as with sugar, right? When serum concentrations of glucose goes up, it's because skeletal muscle is saturated with glucose. So there's always a bit of a negative feedback.
Yep. So, like I said, for me, almost everything here in range. But I thought it'd be cool. I mean, I think that was pretty detailed, and I think probably pretty
Hmm.
valuable to a lot of people. So I'll
You
stop
look
the
you look very
screen share.
healthy. This is one of the better blood works I've seen in a while.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of people who are not on gear?
Yeah, but usually they come to me when they want to start gear. So
Okay.
they contact me, and of course I do. I tell everybody, said, "Hey, listen, I like to see some blood work before you start gear. Maybe
Mm,
if they sign up for coaching, I tell them, well, let's see if we can get your drug-free potential really. So optimize the diet first, and the training, health supplementation, do a couple hormone checks, and then after, if they're still moving up in weight and their strength goes up, it was purely the diet and the training strategy. Training volume was a rate limiting factor, and then maybe at one point they reach their real potential, and then we introduce the hormones."
right.
And some guys, they
Interesting.
don't go up at all within 2 months, and they say, "Okay, you want to take it to the next level? Let's start hormone replacement," and then we take it from there.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, man, I have, a couple other things, but I think we'll save those for another time. We're going on 2 hours now. I didn't
we
realize
should
that.
finish
So,
up the relationship stuff that was on a cliffhanger. So let's.
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we were just talking about how it is on social media. I just think it's funny. Like, I don't know. I always laugh. Like, I don't want to be too specific, but I introduced one of my roommates to somebody, and
Mhm.
she had I'll just say a reputation, and I was just trying to help them out, short term. Well, they ended up getting like pretty serious, but
All right.
I lived with the guy, so I
Mhm.
knew he'd never posted anything on social media or anything like that. But all of a sudden, he's posting like, I'm so proud of this girl, and like,
Okay.
and I knew she was making him do it
Yeah,
because
and
she was actually more dominant and he was really passive. And like I'd be there to hear these arguments and hear all the craziness. But then on social media, he's like, my world and everything. I'm just like, all right, like I don't get into that stuff. Like I never
that's
like that.
it's
I
it's
keep my
that's how
private
it
life
goes
private.
now. But it's you have to got to proclaim it to the world, and then 3 months later, it's like this vicious argument, or they block each other, right?
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
No, I usually
people are funny creatures, that's for sure. You know,
Yeah,
like
it's very interesting to see the dynamics. So like I say, I don't think social media is like super healthy. I mean, I never had. I have a personal Instagram, but like I never did anything with it until I started the podcast.
right.
And then I was like, well, you have to have a social media presence. But I consume very, very little on Instagram. Like almost never. I don't look at my feed. They'll get me sometimes where I go to search somebody. You know, if you go to the search, immediately there's like all like the different things.
Yeah, right.
And my eye will like catch something and I want to go look at it. And I try to stop myself from doing it, but sometimes I give in. But I consume very little.
That's good.
So YouTube I do like, but there's only a
Mhm.
few channels. Usually it's like somebody sends me something.
Right.
There's a few channels that I'm subscribed to, but I like YouTube. I mean, I've been on YouTube since 2000 and like whenever it was first made, 2008
Right.
or something like that.
Mhm.
So
It's a
I'm very,
great place to learn. Almost don't need
it is.
university anymore.
I do feel like it's way better than like Instagram is just so like you just it's attention and you know you just
Mhm.
can't it's very interesting. You'll see people who have huge followings on one platform and like
Mhm.
none on the other because they're
Yeah.
very different, you know. Um, and I like YouTube a lot. I mean it's a lot of infotainment, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you can find stuff that's very detailed,
Mhm.
absolutely. Great podcasts, you can find lectures, but most of I think what you're consuming is infotainment.
Right.
But I really am a big fan of YouTube. But
Oh, I think it's a great platform. I wish I started it sooner, but it's
yeah,
the comment section and the abuse is a little bit difficult to get over
I see.
sometimes.
I like the comment section though. Like if you go to Joe
Yeah.
Rogan's clips that are now on YouTube, ever since he went
Mhm.
to Spotify,
Yeah.
half of the comments are about how nobody wants to go to Spotify and they don't have comment sections. Like
Mm.
there's almost a culture to the comment sections, and you also I find that it's a good way to vet some information. You know, like if
Right.
somebody has a video
Hmm.
and it's like telling you all this stuff. You can look at the like and dislike ratio, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Hmm.
But you can also go in the comments, and if you have like a keen eye for what to look for, you'll find either people elaborating on what the person said
Hmm.
or finding they'll post evidence against what the person said.
Yeah.
And then you can
Hmm.
look into that further because sometimes it's just a topic you don't know that much about. And then you read the comments and it's like, oh, everybody agrees, or oh no, these people are calling out him for this and this and
Right.
this.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just find like for me, I'm just trying to keep the messages down to a manageable amount. And of course, every
Yeah.
video you post, like right now, it's usually 100 comments, right? And me as a coach, I feel like obligated to reply to everybody, plus all the
Yeah.
DMs that I get, plus all the messages I get from my clients on 5 different social medias, right? So after a while, it
Right.
becomes a little bit much. And then the extra stuff that on YouTube, which I should interact with my fans more, but it slowly gets pushed back.
Yeah. Well, and the more you grow, I mean, like I respond to almost every comment, but
Hmm.
I average about 1,000 views per video, which is
Yeah.
very maintainable. Like it's just not that hard for me to do it. Sometimes I'll have clients who will like DM me and text me and email me, and then I'm just like, just can you leave it
One
in
place.
here?
Yeah.
Or they'll send me new emails with all like every time they email me, it's a new email. I'm like, just can you just leave it in the thread
Right.
so I can see our whole conversation, you know?
Hmm.
So I like to keep things organized in that way. But I still am at a capacity where I can usually answer people. But I mean, you know, you have like 3 times the followers that I do now, and then you know your growth
And
is
it's a lot
doing
of
really
dark
well.
questions in the comment section, which I'm always a little bit worried about, especially
Yeah,
considering most guys are under anonymity.
right.
And the advice wouldn't even be good anyway, you know. So yeah, how can I run this compound? You don't need my approval, and I don't need your situation, your medical background, your previous experience. You know,
Right.
can I
It's
run
hard. Yeah.
700 trend per week? I don't know, make your own decision. Well, yeah, but comment after comment, man. It's
Yeah.
that's why I'm always a little bit hesitant to really dive into the comment section and it doesn't matter how often you answer a certain question, the next video the same question will be there.
Oh, sure.
And they answered again. So it's better to make a video about it. And then you make a video about it.
Right.
A week later, the same question will pop up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And but so far, my comment section has been very respectful and, with the occasional troll. And
Same.
then,
Yeah.
and people are generally positive. Sometimes you're a guy that I don't believe, so fine, start your own YouTube channel. But what I'm more surprised with is like the like to dislike ratio. I'm hovering around 99%.
Nice.
Which is pretty high.
Yeah.
And I have like videos with 100% likes and 500 actual likes. So it's 100%, 500, so not a single dislike.
That's great.
That's surprising, you know. So usually I feel loved when I put videos up. And sometimes they don't get any views, but then it's probably not in depth or too in depth.
Too in depth. Yeah, I know it's tough because sometimes you want to go into those details and like you have to remember, because like to me, like I want like details, right? Like I want to go into the details. I want to know like everything, but you lose a lot of people. I mean, I actually think this was a really cool segment going through the blood work. And I think that's probably better.
You'll see like you do the timestamps, you do the blood work, and you see like audience, and then it comes up again when you have the relationship.
Which is a shame because it's like, that's so useful, you know? I mean, like I know you were joking about it, but in a way it's like you're getting Steve's knowledge on this, right? And like, and you can understand what's important, what's not. And maybe, I'm sure a lot of the audience didn't really know about all those values. So it's a shame that that's what skipped, but that's what it is.
It's the same with the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease videos. They probably got the worst audience retention of all. But it's who's transparent about it besides me?
Right.
Nobody. And who can actually explain what's going on besides me?
Sometimes you just get like a total flop though. Like I had like 1,000 views, 1,000 views, 1,000 views. And I made a video that I actually thought was pretty funny that on Instagram was one of my most liked posts, most viewed posts. I then made a video about what happened and it got like 200, 300 views. Like it just total flop. Right. And then the videos went back. I was like, what the hell happened?
And then sometimes you upload a video that was a flop a month ago and then you check your views and then they're like 10,000.
I've had that happen too, where if you look at like over time, there was a video on, what's the guy's name? Dave something, this huge guy and his interaction with Rich Piana. And it was like a couple thousand. And then, it dropped off as normal. And then it just like spiked. And it's like now got like 12,000 views. And
it gets shared. I feel like uploading to YouTube is like dating. Sometimes you get rejected. Sometimes you get like, stabby comments, and other times you get lucky. You know? Even though you were like, you didn't even care. You're like,
right.
I'll go get this girl's number, and then you end up the same night.
Right.
So that's kind of like YouTube. It's like you're rolling the dice every time. But so far it's been
as long as you don't put your value on it. You don't tie yourself to like a like, because it's hard not to. You get that little dopamine rush. You see that this video is doing really well, and it's hard.
Also, I schedule my releases to like quarter to midnight, and then I wake up to if I don't have like 1,000 views, I get a little bit upset.
Yeah. Right.
But now the goal has been raised to 2,000 views.
Right. Yeah. As you go up, it's going to be.
And it has nothing to do with that I want views. I just wanted to get some traction, that it passes the YouTube algorithm, and that I know that people can actually watch something and learn something new. If it's not something they haven't heard before somewhere else, or they did their own research. Because I do try to introduce something new in every video, which is tough sometimes. Because most of the stuff has already been talked about one place or another.
Somewhere,
whether that's PubMed or somewhere else. So even though I was the one that introduced cardiovascular disease and systemic inflammation from carrier oils in depth.
Okay, I will say, and I find this so funny, because again, and I don't get a ton of time to watch all the podcasts, but I've seen a few with Leo and you guys, and it's always pointed out like, we're the first people to talk about this, and I'm sure sometimes you are, but there's at least two examples where I'm like,
not always. Yeah,
I know there's a physician I know who's very into bodybuilding, and this guy was telling me about some of these things 6-7 years ago, right? But he's niche, so but bodybuilders know him. But maybe YouTube. So maybe to say I was the first to introduce it to YouTube, but maybe not, because it's obviously there's millions of people out there. You never know what
we have to correct ourselves, or we're introducing it to 14,000 subscribers.
Right.
It's just not general population,
Right,
and it's so, you might have heard it somewhere, like some people complain like, oh, you sound the same as Derek. Well, I've been talking with Derek for 2 years, so there's bound to be some overlap, right? But you might have heard it on Derek's channel, but maybe it came from me, maybe not.
I didn't realize that you guys knew Derek that long.
Yeah, I know him for long. I had a private Facebook group in the past, where literally everything I know is written as articles, because it was easier to
Okay.
set up than a membership website. And
How long have you known Leo?
Leo, over a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when he
And
was
Leo
working with
knew
him,
Derek through you, or?
now we're all in the same space. So Leo wanted Derek on the podcast, and then he kind of, he went like through the best friend, the less attractive best friend,
Yeah.
being me. And I told Derek, said, I think Leo wants you on the podcast. And then, Derek is always so busy because, with 400,000 subs, and back then he already had 100K, and he's also got like 8 different business ventures going on. So he said, yeah, well, when I have time. So a couple months later, he contacted Leo. And then we realized, over time, we realized we were doing pretty well. So now we're doing the Bio Bros. Actually, we'll record one on Monday if everything's on schedule, and then we'll release that. So it's just slowly getting in touch with people.
Yeah.
But
I liked that episode. That was the first one I'd seen of the Bio Bros, but I liked it. It was good. It was like, when you kind of know about a topic, you also want to jump in with your own things.
Right.
As I'm listening to you guys, I'm like, yeah, I have something to add. And like,
right. We all had something to add. That's why we're completely talking over each other the whole episode.
Yeah, right.
Because we all get excited. Yeah, what about this?
Yeah.
What about that? So hopefully we'll do another episode this Monday, and then we'll release that, there on all of our channels.
Yeah.
To give each other a little bit of exposure. But I'm sure 100% of my audience is subscribed to Derek's channel.
Right.
Like 1% of his audience is subscribed to mine. So, whatever exposure I can get from Derek is absolutely great.
No, that's awesome.
Right.
Well, dude, I know we're going on over 2 hours. I appreciate the time. I know this is after 10 p.m. over there, right? 10:08
yeah.
over there. So.
The good thing is that now that I stopped, I'll finish off with this. The good thing that I stopped training. I only need 6 hours of sleep.
Really? Okay.
And I don't feel broken during the day.
Interesting.
I always felt broken because I would train in the morning, and then you need 2 hours of workout and 2 hours to recover, and then you get half a day of activity left, and then I would work until 8 p.m. Then I got about 2 hours to unwind.
It's time consuming, man. Especially if you're like, taking it really seriously and get up, you make your food, you're getting ready mentally, you drive to the gym,
anabolic window,
killing at the gym, you come back, it's like, it's been 3 hours and you're like, what the hell just happened to my day?
I would get to work at 12, and now I start at 8. So I got 4 hours, and I'm more productive for the rest of the day, and I need less sleep. So normally I would, like at 10 o'clock, I would be dead.
And you're fasting, so you're not even eating. So you're probably just killing it.
I'm killing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's why I don't feel so bad about, giving it up, even though, when you look at me now, it's, what does this guy know about body? You get that comment. So it's, it's all temporary though. At one point,
Yeah. Now you've got the pictures to show it though. It matters if you were never there.
That's even that's even the worst thing, Here, this is what I used to look like. You got it on the phone, right? This is what I used to look like. That's me. Same guy. Which is terrible. I would look like this right now.
If you told me you were like that now, it's not like, it's hard to, you can see traps, delts, like you can't, now maybe if you were like shirtless, it'd be different, but you can't tell that much of a difference.
My shoulders were literally like here, 4 months ago.
Derek's.
My cheek. Yeah. So funny thing is, like, Derek went through the same process, but he didn't say that he took bodybuilding on the back burner. But when you go to his videos from a couple months ago, when he was like a lot leaner, more streamlined, he looked exactly the same. Black long sleeves, no shoulders, no traps, because he was on lockdown and he only had dumbbells or something at home. And so he focused on burning. That's
comment section or something about that. Yeah, the people were saying he looked smaller.
His channel went up tremendously during that time
because he was so busy doing stuff like that.
So I'm doing the same thing and just putting all my effort into business, and then when I feel happy with the growth and ebook sales and consultations, that kind of stuff, and my non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is resolved, I will go back to the bodybuilding.
Yeah,
there's a time and place for everything. So
I'm good mindset.
Yeah, I'm not too worried.
All right, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, not my pleasure. Enjoy your day. I'll talk to you again very soon.
All right.
Take care, buddy.